Alright, today we're talking about trimming the bottom of your cylinders or whatever you have to trim. We've talked about the drying process, getting the whole piece to be leather hard. You can see the top is not bone dry and the bottom is mid to late leather hard. You don't want to wait till it's bone dry, and you also don't want to trim something that is super plastic. So the first step, you want to work with a nice clean wheel, and you also want to make sure that your wheel collar is on so that it can catch all of the stuff that falls off. You're going to need a little bit of wet clay so that you can anchor this down to the wheel head. So first we have to get this centered in the middle. So we can use these rings that are around the wheel to kind of get it roughly centered. And we can see that did too good of a job. That's pretty close to being centered. And so we're going to check, and that's why you trim this bottom part with the wood tool way back before you took it off the wheel, so that there's not a whole lot of extra stuff at the bottom of the piece. Remember that step where we went down at the bottom? So what I'm going to do is I'm going to start by drawing a circle, and you have to be right at the 3 o'clock mark and all the way on the bottom of the piece. If I draw my circle, I need to move my piece towards the edge that's closest to the rim. So the circle is not going to move, but the work will. So I know I have to move it to the left a little bit. I'm going to erase that circle just by rubbing over it with my finger. I'm going to try again. Get as close to the edge as you can with the circle. Okay, I'm getting closer. Now it needs to move in this direction because that's the closest edge. So I'm going to move it that way just a little bit. And draw my circle again. And you can see I'm just laying this needle tool down on here. I'm using 2 hands to make sure that it's steady, and just lay it down like, this might be outdated, but the needle on a record, and just let it spin underneath. You don't want to go straight down into it like this. Nice angle so that it draws a nice line. And you can see it's even all the way around. Then take that little bit of clay that you grabbed earlier, and I like to form it into not like a total coil, but just a little bit of a coil. Put your hand on top. Gently press that into the bottom. Another press. And I usually do 3 or 4 of these. For a really tall form like this, I'd probably do 4. Taller forms need more support because the base is narrower. It's more likely that you're going to knock it off of the wheel. So I use a little bit more clay. Don't go overkill on this. All we do is dry out clay. When you press on these guys, make sure you press down into the wheel. Don't press into the rim of your piece. You'll break the rim, especially if this is really dry or really plastic. It'll bend it. So finding the right time to do this is important. So now it's attached and it's right in the center. You can see it's moving. The bottom, you can tell, there's a little bit of a wobble to it. So as it dried, or maybe as I threw it, it wasn't quite centered at the bottom. So we can't rely on that to center the top part of the form. Next step is to grab your trimming tool. I like to lay one hand on top of the piece, and I usually start on the outside and start trimming away. The round side is kind of nice for this too. It takes away a little bit more. And you should be getting kind of nice long, you know, that, what is that, French silk, that chocolate pie that's got the little chocolate shavings on top. It should look nice and long like those, not little tiny chips, and it shouldn't be really long and really sticking back to the piece. If it turns into little chips, it means this is too dry. If it turns into really long sticky ones, it means it's too wet. So you want to find just the perfect amount of wetness to trim. And the most clay that you have is going to be out here at this edge. Usually that's where you couldn't pull all that clay up. So get that first. Then I'm going to come into the inside. Notice my hand position. I'm holding the tool. Got a pretty good grip on it. I'm going to come into the middle. Got a little bit of a loose connection down here at the bottom, so I'm just going to push down the clay a little bit more at the base. And I'm just going to dig in with the corner here and move to the inside slowly. Every once in a while you get extra stuff up there. Just blow on it. Don't go too deep, especially right at the middle here. If it's going to grab right here. And you haven't really lived until you've had a piece grab and then fly off the wheel and go spinning around. Likewise, you haven't really lived until you trim through the bottom of one of your pieces. It's going to happen. And the only way you're going to know how deep you should go is to trim through a few of them. You know that you've got about a ½ inch here. Remember when you did that trick with the needle tool and you tested the thickness? I've got a ½ inch, so I know I've got plenty of depth here to keep on trimming. My thumb on this hand is just gliding along so that I know about where I'm at. Alright, that looks like a pretty good foot for this piece. You can hold this tool at all different angles. I'm going to flatten it out now. Okay, stop it and we can see. We want this part to be really flat. I'm not touching this until the very end because that's my marker of how deep this is. If I start grinding down this and then go here and then here, then here, this could get too deep and you could trim through the bottom of your piece. So I'm just going to give that a quick little trim. And sharp edges like this, you can see how sharp that edge is. We want our pieces to look sharp but not be sharp. So what I'm going to do with that little part here is to just trim a little bevel on the side of it and do the same thing over here. So when you set it down on the counter, that's not going to chip off. Okay. This is a little bit on the dry side. So what I'm going to do is as a final move is run the sponge over it and work up a little bit of slip on the bottom and just let that slip kind of even out that base. Run my finger over it. Now you can have all sorts of fun with the wood tool. You can come in and burnish. You can also use your rib. And yes, you can also decorate the form once it's upside down, and you can put all sorts of little marks on the outside. You can really get crazy with your trimming. For this piece, I'm going to keep it a little bit simpler. Just going to try to smooth out this little foot here using my fingers, using the tools. Okay, that looks pretty good. My last step before I take it off the wheel is going to be to sign it. I prefer to sign with a dull end of a pencil or the wood tool. Don't sign it with your needle tool, you end up poking through it. And I always like to put the date or the year on there. Carefully remove your clay at the bottom. Usually you can just give it a little twist. And sometimes you'll get a little piece or two stuck to it. But if you do it at the right time, it should be okay. You should feel a pretty good depth there. I usually leave those little crumbs on my signature until after bisque, and then I'll just brush them away. Fussing with it now is just going to cause problems. Do one last check. Time for green check-in, and then you can put it in back.